Good afternoon. My name is Eric Wishart. I'm the Vice President of the club, and I'm also a journalist at AFP News Agency. So I'd like to welcome you all to this very special panel today. It's great to see such a great turnout. Before I introduce the speakers, I'd like just to talk about 2 or 3 things we're doing at the club. Tonight we're officially opening our latest photo exhibition, and it's very timely. It's about Hong Kong protests past and present. It goes back, we use archive photos from the 60s and right through Occupy right up to the present day. So it's up at the moment, so I'd invite you after lunch. You're welcome to go and have a look. Otherwise, they're opening at 6 o'clock tonight, so please come. And we've also been holding events. I think it's fair to say that at least when it comes to the protests, Hong Kong's become a hostile environment for journalists. And the club is very aware of this. We've been doing a lot on press freedom, and we've held a series of workshops. We had a workshop on security 2 weeks ago. We had a workshop on the legal challenges for journalists covering the protests on Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we have a workshop, breakfast workshop, which will be done by Lockman Sway from the Chinese University of Hong Kong on digital security. And although this is something that very much affects journalists in the field, I would also open it to anybody. Okay, how we do? Because, anybody who uses a mobile app for messaging or a mobile phone knows that we're all exposed to hacking or whatever. So that's 8 o'clock on Tuesday, and Shelley Banjo from Bloomberg, the technology editor, will be moderating that. Also, we'll be organising other events. We're going to do a workshop in first aid, which if you see the kind of injuries that are happening, it's very important that people are capable of dealing with bleeding, whatever. So we'll do a first aid workshop. We're going to do one on covering suicide and mental health issues. And next month, on September the 12th, I'm going to be hosting a panel on fake news and the Hong Kong protests, which is going to be quite interesting. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the speakers. By the way, this is being live streamed on Facebook, and we'll upload the video later on today, I hope. So in no order of importance, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Chris Xiong, who is the chairperson of the Hong Kong Journalists Association, and Chris is very much in the front line, gets a lot of the reports of the attacks that have been happening against journalists. Anthony Wallace is a colleague of mine at AFP, a photographer, and he's going to be showing some images that he's been taking over the past few weeks. Damon Pang is a multimedia journalist at RTHK. Eric Chung is a freelance journalist, not long from Hong Kong University. Now you're straight in the thick of it, and you've been doing a great job. Jennifer Cray is a reporter with the Hong Kong Free Press. And I'd just like to take some time out to praise the Hong Kong Free Press, who's been doing great work with a very, very small, take a bow, Tom Grundy, don't be shy. So, you've been doing a good job. And of course, last but certainly not least, President of the FCC and Bloomberg Senior International Correspondent Judy Schneider, who will be moderating the panel. Okay, thank you.
Well, first, we're thrilled that you're all here. You're all exhausted, we know, and some of the hardest working journalists in Hong Kong, probably the world right now. So thank you all for being here, and I think let's give another round of applause to these folks who've been out here tirelessly. So I just want to start by talking about asking each of the panelists the things they have been seeing on the ground, on the front lines in the past few weeks. Have things been escalating, and how have the police been responding to journalists? Are we seeing a difference? Are we seeing lack of access? Are we seeing an escalation in violence? specifically targeted toward journalists. I'd like to start with Chris, because Chris gets the reports from a number of journalists at the HKJA. And what have you been seeing in recent weeks?
Thank you, Jody. Before I start, I would like to take this opportunity to say salute to all the frontline journalists. Some of them are here. For the round-the-clock coverage of the protests. And I have to make a confession that I had not spent a lot of time, say, than many other frontline journalists on the spot. I did visit some of the so-called war zones myself, have a taste of the tear gas and all the tension, emotions there. The association has collected and tried to gather actually as many as possible cases of reporters being attacked, harassed, bullied, maltreated by police officers. Indeed, we also welcome complaints from journalists for, say, bullies and attacks by protesters. But to be honest, most, if not all, cases were involve police officers. What you see from the press statement, I would say, is only kind of a tip of an iceberg. Simply because there are many other minor cases, injuries, reporters being, say, pushed, shoved, say, by officers, suffering minor bruises, simply just don't bother, say, to report to us. They were too busy, and I think when they work maybe early morning and then finish work and then back to work again, I think just don't have time to report to us. We hope that we can gather a fuller picture to get a better, say, a fuller picture of the magnitude of the problem, which is definitely the worst for many decades. I won't go into the details of those cases. Maybe I think the frontline journalists here are in the best position to tell. I just want to make two points. First, what we see now, the problem media facing, I will say is just part of the bigger problem the whole society is facing. Boils down to the question of police power or force. Someone would say violence. And as you can see from a lot of these footages by the media on social media, the way police, say, deal with the protesters says a lot, I think, about the problem now we are facing. The central government would like to say this is a highly political issue, one country, two system, etc., etc. But I think to a lot of people in the streets or just want to have a quiet life, it's about police power. So I think the problem facing media is part of the problem the whole society is facing. That on occasions, many occasions, they have violated their own, say, rules in exercising their power, in street search, in arrest, in making arrests, in, say, so-called facilitating media in their coverage. So if we say we have to look for a solution, I think the solution has to be a bigger, and a bigger one. I mean, that the way police exercise their power, whether our checks and balances mechanism now works. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work. Secondly, more specifically on the problem they deal with the media. Again, I won't go into the details of those cases, but based on what we gather, some quite direct, say, experience from reporters, some clear footages, quite clear that on not isolated occasions that the police target at reporters when they found tear gases. The first shot was on journalists, then to the protesters. Police, so far, I think couldn't quite explain, say, why that had happened. Was that a misshot or by mistake? I think that, anyway, there should be still an explanation, but no, we don't have that. And then on many occasions, we can sense the feeling of hostility or skepticism among the police force, at least I would say among a section of the police force towards media. You can see from TV coverage that when they made arrests, first they asked reporters to stay outside certain district, what they call cordon off area. Secondly, their officers stood in front of the camera. You won't be able to shoot anything. Unfortunately, though, of course, because it's in streets, there are so many people taking videos, and ultimately some scenes, ugly scenes, still manage to see the light. But there are many other cases that even reporters won't be able to, say, tell exactly what happened. And also from the remarks they made to reporters, or in their private conversation, which were unfortunately, say, taped by reporters, remarks such as, well, the reporters were shooting, be careful. Or, reporters, you guys were causing instability in the society. I can only read from those remarks by making a conclusion that they don't want the press to be there. They don't want some of the things being taped and videoed by journalists. And that's a bigger problem that for the past couple of weeks, a key message that we say in our statements, people's right to know, and the power and the right duty of media to monitor how power is being exercised by the police. So that's the big, I would say, the key points that I would like to make today, and I will leave the direct first-hand experience to our frontline journalist colleagues. Thanks.
Thank you. Eric, so you've kind of started your career in a very interesting moment. You're not that far out of HKU, and you're on the front lines as a freelancer, an independent journalist.
Correct.
Tell us what that's been like for you, and kind of sum up, particularly the last few weeks.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me. I think Chris just gave a very good summary about what local journalists have been facing on the ground. And you specifically mentioned about the hostility and skepticism that some frontline officers have towards the media. I think that's absolutely correct. You know, we have been, I'm quite lucky that I haven't been, shot with tear gas or rubber bullets. I haven't, had such experience, thankfully. But I would say that, the situation on the ground in general, especially over the past few weeks, have been very much unpredictable. Usually, when we're covering the story, back in June, it's rather easy for us to plan ahead. We would more or less know the routes. We'll know, who the organizer is. But right now, we have a lot of netizen-initiated protests and demonstrations, and people make decisions on the ground about their next moves. And so, as journalists on the ground, it has become a little bit more difficult for us to follow what exactly is going on. We have to rely on our colleagues or other media friends, who have been monitoring live feed for some updated information from time to time. And I would say that as a freelancer especially, there is one particular challenge about getting proper accreditation, because Chris was mentioning about about the hostility and skepticism, right? We do need to carry our accreditation, our credentials all the time with us to ensure that, we get proper access to, certain areas. But as freelancers, sometimes we do face a situation where we don't necessarily have, a proper accreditation. For me, I've been so far lucky on that, but I know some other freelancers who have been running into issues like that. And so, it is challenging. It has become a little bit more challenging over the past few weeks compared to when the movement started in June. But I think, my fellow panelists might have more to say about, the experience with the police.
The one other thing.
Sorry.
Have you been asked for your press identification?
Yes.
Regularly?
Regularly.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
So Jennifer, can you talk a little bit, you've been doing this, since the beginning of the protest. Can you talk a little bit about whether you have been, you have had access denied? What has it been like? Have you been able to get pretty much where you needed to get? Or is it, and has that changed, I guess, as the level of kind of chaos has heightened in recent weeks?
Right, so thank you. Well, with regards to whether or not we're able to gain access into these protests, we have been very fortunate in that we've been able to go to wherever we want to go. But I just want to build on what Eric said about carrying press credentials with you, because we're regularly, at least from my personal experience, we're regularly told to wear our press cards on our necks. And, both police and protesters will approach you and ask to see your press credentials, and typically they're looking for, which organization do you work for, and some protesters are suspicious of particular news organizations who they claim have, a bias towards, say, the police or something like that. So that's one of the kind of main difficulties we face. But I just want to talk about how the protests have changed in recent weeks. So we've seen a kind of spread to the new territories and to residential areas where protesters have been operating in areas and kind of approaching residents who would otherwise not be engaged in these kind of protests. And I think that really speaks to the efficacy of the be water tactic. And on the ground, as Eric said, the be water tactic, is typically, decisions are typically made on the ground, and this can often lead to very heated verbal disagreements. But this enables protesters to really be fluid and be able to avoid the police and that kind of stuff. But having said that, when we look at Monday's general strike, where there was protests in at least 7 districts, that's very difficult for journalists to cover. I'm part of a team of 4 full-time reporters, and protests are happening in 7 different districts. So it's very difficult for us to cover. But we're seeing a lot of kind of disorganization, and police also are kind of disorganized in their kind of, when they try to kind of control protesters and stuff, and a lot of the time journalists get caught up in that. So we're seeing some hostility towards journalists, and speaking from personal experience, I've been told journalists don't have any special rights. I've been told to kind of move and stuff like that. Thankfully, I've never been shoved or anything, but we're definitely seeing increased hostility towards journalists.
Damon, you're a multimedia journalist, and you're with RTHK, local outfit. So can you talk a little bit about that? And I'm going to ask Anthony to talk about that as well. When you are shooting film or video, how has that been, and have you had more problems of late in getting access and perhaps your shots being blocked?
I think there's not much of a blocking per se, because colleagues and I have been still be able to shoot because we kind of practice like not going too much on the front line. Like we kind of take a slightly step back position because we're kind of short staffed, so we cannot afford anybody getting hurt. Luckily, I'm still in one piece. But I was just going to add a little bit to Chris's comments about police firing tear gas, particularly at journalists. There have been occasions, I can actually pinpoint, I think it was the first night of unrest in Mong Tai Sin. There was a tear gas shot, particularly at a group of journalists with no protesters around, no charging at all, no advancement of protesters at all. A tear gas just came down on journalists, and I think it hit one of the journalists' backpack, and it got inside it, and he had to throw the bag away because it's totally got burned out. And the second thing about safety of journalists, I would say, every day I kind of got a lot of media friends on social media. They're telling me there's a guy who got hit by a brick by a protester. He has to go to hospital. A very good friend of mine got hit in the chin the other day, and he didn't even know what hit him. Another good friend got I think it was a tear gas canister shot in the media vest, got burned a little bit. It's okay. But it's a friend's wife, a photographer's wife, was saying, "Oh, my husband's hurt again today. He's hurt yesterday. He's hurt today." I was asking him how he's doing. He's just saying, "Oh, it's just minor injury. I can go on. I can go back to work the end of the day." And those who got injured actually are very anxious to go back on the front line. So it's really, if you talk about safety, I think people, journalists are anxious to they don't want to miss anything. As much as like they have been hurt or anything, but they really want to be part of it and kind of be like the first-hand person recording history for Hong Kong.
And Anthony, I know you have some photos you want to show us, and I would like to hear from you a little bit about being a photographer out there, and I know you're often right up front, and what that's been like, and what steps you've taken also to keep yourself safe.
Okay, so here's just a taste of what I've been covering over the past couple of months. I'd say in terms of safety, it's really different covering these protests compared to what I'm used to. Hong Kong is usually about features and dying traditions, but every week being on the ground seems to be getting more intense from both sides, with rising anger from both the police and the protesters. So I'd say whilst there are dangers that we face from the police trying to control the crowds, there's also the protesters who are using more bricks or slingshots, and as a frontline photographer you can get caught in the middle of that. So I've had colleagues who've been bricked in the back, in the head. I've been hit by a tear gas pellet in my leg, and various other injuries. So I'd say it's dangerous from both sides, and it's also our role as journalists not to endanger ourselves. Find high spots and always know your exit point, and become equipped to the scene and just expect the unexpected. But the other day I was on the bridge between Tamar Park and the Admiralty Centre. Some journalists were filming between the water barricades, behind which some police were standing, and the police just lashed out with pepper spray and threw I guess it was a tear gas canister, like literally 2 meters in front of me. So that's I think it's changing as well. The police are getting more heavy-handed, but it's not just them who are doing that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You can get it from either side as things have gotten more chaotic and you're caught in the middle. And we learned in our safety training, our workshop 2 weeks ago, that you don't want to be in the middle. So I wanted to now shift gears a little bit and ask you to put on your media criticism hats here. You guys have all been part of this, and you're reading everything. And by the way, if you haven't been following these folks on Twitter, you're not on Twitter, because they're all great at it. So my question would be, how do you see the overall coverage? And I know you're all going to, I'm not asking you to rate your own coverage. We won't do that. But there's a range of media, and some have been pro-regime, some have been anti-regime, some have been there's a range. Are you seeing, for the most part, journalists acting what you would consider responsibly in covering this and observing it, not becoming part of it? And also, how do you do that in these situations? I think it's particularly, I'd like to hear from Chris first, because he represents local journalists who, obviously, this is their home, and they're in a particularly challenging situation because this is often very personal for them. And how do you think we're doing as media here in Hong Kong in covering what is arguably the biggest story we're going to have in perhaps decades?
It's a huge challenge in many aspects. First, of course, it's the nature, the scale, and the length, and the complexities of the protest itself. We used to compare it with 2014, say, Umbrella Revolution. We have a kind of a control situation then. It's Admiralty. People know that, say, that's the place. If there is a war, that's the war zone. But this time, the war zones drift. It can happen anywhere. Percival Street, Gloucester Road, Harcourt Road, Wong Tai Sin, Chung Kwan Road, North Point, almost everywhere. Even say when things happen on one spot, it can easily drift to other places. So extremely difficult dangerous actually also for reporters to cover there. So that's one challenge. Second, of course, is a highly polarized dispute now in the society. Journalists, I would say most, if not all, are so part of this community. We have our own feelings about who's right and wrong, what should be done. So I would say we are human beings. I think it's difficult very often to really say have no emotions at all. Particularly when you have a situation that reporters, when you did normal reporting, and you get what you get from police officers, unpredictable. I think maybe last night or two nights ago, outside the Sham Shui Po police station, the tear gas was fired from within the station. Yes, I think they did raise the black flag, maybe seconds, a few seconds. It seems that almost nobody know that they did raise the red flag. And then the tear gas canisters flew from inside the stations. It's quite clear there's an undifferentiated firing of these tear gas. So I think that's the kind of situation and the challenges we face. Back to your question, I would say by and large, yes, of course, media in Hong Kong is quite diverse. They position themselves on different spots of the political spectrum. But I would say by and large, they have done a professional job with the same passion and commitment for journalism and for Hong Kong. Another challenge, of course, is the fake news. A lot of things on the social media, and I would say most of us are not now know there's a thing that there are a lot of fake propaganda on the media. That has and will pose a challenge to the media. But I'm sure that the professional journalists know how to handle it. So those are, I would see the challenges so far. Just like to add one more point. Maybe I'm not sure whether I have a chance to touch on it today. But the challenges we face. What we have heard from the Chinese officials in Shenzhen on yesterday is quite worrying. The liaison office director described it as a life and death situation, and from from the pro-establishment media, we have already seen more talking about, say, the using draconian laws to put things back to normal. That would mean curfews and other exercise of powers by the government. And I won't rule out the possibility that the reporters will face even more challenges and maybe government orders for them, say, not to publish or not to, say, report certain things. That's perhaps the thing that the journalists will now have to prepare and bear in mind. If we have a situation like that, curfew, how we are going to report, people need to know.
So Eric, I'll put the same question to you. You've come out of journalism school at a very interesting time. I'm sure the theoretical is different than the reality. What do you think? What are you seeing out there in terms of the coverage? You know, how would you rate it overall?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that some Hong Kong people do take issues with how a certain media organization is covering the story. We've seen criticism on both sides, I would say. But I think it's also very important to note the distinction between frontline reporters and editors at the back. By large, I think frontline reporters have been, doing their job properly. They have been, been really brave in terms of, going to the front line and, filming, recording, reporting, what the actions, over there. In terms of what I would like to see, what I think local media or local international media should be doing a little bit more is that I think we should be fact-checking information a little bit more. I have a feeling that some media organizations normally take the approach of reporting what a particular person said, what he said, what she said, what the government said, without giving too much context to it. Because I think we would all agree that we have seen certain, parties making, statements that are just factually not correct, in the movement. And I think it is our duty to call that out, to call out falsehoods, to provide context and explain to our viewers, our audience, why they are wrong, and we need to hold them to account. And I think that's what journalists are for. That's the importance of journalism in Hong Kong right now. I think I absolutely agree with the more traditional classic form of journalism, which says that we should be fair, we should tell the truth. We should maintain independence from all the sides, no matter how we feel about the situation. I'm all for that. But at the same time, I think it's also very important for us to call out falsehoods and do fact checking a little bit more.
Yeah, very good points. Jennifer, I'd like you to talk a little bit about social media and Hong Kong Free Press is all over Twitter, thank goodness. We wake up every morning and can read you guys, and there it all is. But what have you found in terms of trying to not only report but then get this out there quickly on social media? And obviously you're a user of social media. How have you found that this has been as a journalist as a tool in covering these protests?
Right, so social media is indispensable to journalists. Of course, Twitter, we have Telegram, various kind of online forums. So one of the difficulties we face as a small news team with only 4 full-time reporters is that we're unable to cover everything. And I think most media outlets, regardless of size, have also found this. There are far too many small updates. We can't write an article on everything, right? So one of the things we were kind of experimenting with is the use of Twitter, and I think that's why you're seeing why Hong Kong Free Press is so active on Twitter, is because we simply cannot include everything in our articles, and a lot of the time we often use that content to kind of put in other articles as a reference. But one of the difficulties we face, and I think any journalist faces, is the verifying. And I'm just going to build on what Eric said, because it's very important for us to take the initiative to verify these kind of small updates. And there has been various instances of misinformation being perpetuated by media outlets. But I also think kind of one of the trends that I've noticed is the use of language and just building on what Eric said, like the attribution of language. So stuff like, when Carrie Lam initially, she still uses the phrase to plug a loophole in reference to why she introduced the extradition bill in the first place. And a lot of this has been perpetuated as a standalone fact. I've seen some articles that have included that kind of phrasing, that alongside the use of violence, for example, to describe the Legco storming, which is problematic in itself because it was, I think, it can be more accurately described as vandalism. But it's kind of the recycling of this language without proper fact-checking. I think we should, we're all exhausted. We've all been on the front lines. We're there almost every night, and when it's our day off, we're too emotionally invested to switch off. So regardless of that, we should be taking the initiative to fact-check these statements and information.
Yeah, the nuance is very important. So I'd like to ask Damon, as again a multimedia journalist, but also as a local journalist, there is that added, I think, challenge or pressure, given that this is your community you're covering. You're not just covering this for readers and viewers who may be very far away. And how has that pressure manifested itself?
Well, I was just going to say, number one, that we were at home the other night and we gonna get like 2 rounds of canisters right in the neighborhood, and I had to switch off the aircon for just make sure the family's okay. But I mean, personally, I can't speak for everybody, but personally, I've been trying to stay away from the protests when I'm off duty. I would only be at protest sites when absolutely necessary. The same thing applied during Occupy. I just try. I think the public sees us as they want us to be completely neutral. They want us to be objective. So even though I may have my own personal views, I make sure that I don't express it anywhere in public, or that I don't actually go join the protest myself. The other part you're talking about. I was just going to say, I was just writing something last night about when the police were talking about the laser pen, how they didn't think they need to consult the Department of Justice when they arrested the student leader for possessing an offensive weapon. I just look at the law, the Public Orders Ordinance. It has a clause that specifically says when you prosecute somebody under this offense, you must, when you bring the case forward, you must consult the DOJ. And I wrote that online on Twitter. And then I just got a reply from a user. I didn't really look up who the user was, and they're just saying, "Oh, you RTHK, you're supporting the protesters. You disturb, like you're creating chaos in Hong Kong." I was like, I talked to myself like I was just kind of reporting the facts. Like the police just kind of ignored the law, and I got that kind of label. I couldn't really respond, but I mean online anyway. But here's my point. Like there's a lot of perception around. I'll be honest with you, when you asked me to build on my criticism I had about like how people have been covering, I'll be honest with you, I haven't really have time to really watch a lot of coverage. I think some of the TV stations are doing okay. I've seen some of the in-depth stuff, like let's say there's a student reporter who got hit in the head by a canister, cable TV, I think the next day they're trying to look him up and interview him and see how he did. And I think that was very good. I don't think a lot of people did that. But I think overall speaking, journalists, especially frontline journalists, they don't really have much time to express their stance really, because we basically just have to report the facts. Let's say if we're doing a live, we just have to say what is happening. You can't just say, oh, the protester didn't do that, the police didn't do that. You just have to say what you say. It's what you see. So I think yeah, that's about it. Like people just try to be objective and just report what they see.
And Anthony, again, we'll give you the photo perspective here. And obviously, this has been challenging. We've seen, I think, some of the photographers, we've all seen photos of some of the photographers putting their cameras right in the faces of cops, that kind of thing. And yet, we've also seen incredible images like you're showing here and like we have downstairs as part of our exhibit. Can you talk to us about this from a photojournalist perspective and what you've been seeing being out there?
I guess I'm trying to experience what both sides are going through. So, for instance, I was describing to you how the other week in Shenzhen, I put myself right at the front of the front line and tried the march backwards when they count 1, 2, 1, 2 in Chinese. And I was very surprised that the protesters were making sure my helmet was on correctly and I had my proper gas mask. And someone actually held my hand, like a guy held my hand, and I was just like, oh God, but I realized he was just trying to lead me backwards with the whole group. So I put my hand on the shoulder of the person in front of me, and we all marched backwards. And for me, that's a really important thing because I can feel the atmosphere within that group of protesters and see their faces. And I took a picture of two men holding hands right beside me. So and the same from the police side. When they're firing tear gas, we try and go right up to them to get pictures of the blast coming out the gun, and you can feel it from their side as well. They're getting pelted with bricks and water bottles or whatever anyone can find on the ground. I'd say that's for me. I just go there, feel what it's like, get my take on it, and try and put that into photos.
Well, we wanted to leave plenty of time for questions, so we're going to. There will be microphones going around, and we'll try to get some of them back here too. When you ask a question, please state your name and your affiliation, and please try to ask brief questions because we want to get to as many as we can. So let's start over here. Are there questions? There's not questions. Okay, in the back. Are there some in the back? Okay. Oh, somebody's pointing over in the middle of the back. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm Emily Lau of the Democratic Party and a former Hong Kong journalist. I think the FCC is very good in organizing these events to show your support for journalists in these very difficult times. And today, the topic is protests and press freedom. I think we should also address the question of protection for the journalists. And they complain about police brutality and police violence. I want them to tell me how many times have they tried to organize meetings with the police to lodge your complaint. And also, I don't know why the owners of news organizations have not been invited to these events. They are responsible for the safety and protection of their journalists. I don't know whether the FCC knows or wants to know what these employers are doing. And maybe the speakers can tell us, what have your employers told you? And what kind of training and protection and other things have they offered you? Have you made requests to your employers? Were those requests turned down? I think we need to hold these employers to account. So I hope next time when the FCC has a forum like this, employers should be invited. And if they are not, I think we should tell the whole world that these people are quite irresponsible and just throwing their journalists to the wolves and the dogs. And of course, you should invite the police to come to the FCC. I'm sure many people in the audience would like to hear from the police. And also, of course, you should invite different sides because we're talking about dialogue and engagement. So I think the FCC has a very important role to play in these very difficult times. And the fact that there are so many people turning up today, it's a full house, it shows you the concern of the community. So I certainly hope the FCC will not let us down. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. First of all, we have invited the police, and we have continued to invite the police, and we will continue to invite the police and the government to come to our event, to come speak with us. We are continuing to issue that invitation every week. But let's who would like to try this one? Anthony, you're raising your hand.
Sure.
We'll let you start, and then Chris. Thank you.
Well, the person who asked if I would like to come here is my employer, and he said, you know, I would do it, but you're probably far better qualified to speak about the matters that are going on the ground. So you could view me as an extension of him being here, I think. In terms of the safety, I work with AFP, and I'm very lucky that they send a group of journalists every year, and I think it's a growing group of journalists each year, onto safety courses, hostile environment courses, which I took part in. It lasted a week, and I would say that it was a real eye-opening experience. I was fresh off the photo editing desk before I became a photographer. And whilst I was taking part in these exercises, you know, pretending to try to escape from being kidnapped or whatever, I was kind of laughing, thinking, I'm never going to use any of this stuff. But to be honest, throughout the coverage of these protests, I've often thought back to the exercises we did and the observations we were told to make. And so far I've come out unscathed. And you know, that's something I'm very grateful to my agency for providing me with. Also, they ensure I've got a helmet, and I've got a gas mask, which we're basically not allowed to go out without. So, sorry, that's here. It's full face protection, and normally has some filters on here. That ensures I can walk into tear gas and be totally unaffected by it in terms of my respiration. My skin's a different matter, so between the friends on the field, we're advising each other weekly on what we can wear to better protect ourselves. So I've taken to wearing long sleeves in the scorching heat, but it does protect you from the tear gas. So yeah, I'm glad to hear people are concerned for us, but we'd be silly to put ourselves in harm's way without being fully prepared and equipped with, you know, both knowledge and helmets.
And I think those are really good points, and that's one of the reasons we're doing these workshops, our breakfast briefings, where the one on safety, we had a full house, because we went through very specific steps everyone should take. Yeah, Damon, you want to comment?
I'll just try and do it very briefly. Training, Emily, no. It's not really any training, especially for, I think a lot of local news agencies, there's not much training at all. Protection, I think there is an ongoing problem of sourcing filters for gas masks. I think what Anthony is holding is kind of out of stock right now for the filters. I was just speaking another day, I think it was yesterday, with a newspaper reporter. They're saying they're trying to buy some helmets from the mainland, and that there was like a secretary who bought, like, from her own pocket, like $2,000 worth of helmets, and I think it got stopped at the border. Trying to get it from Taobao, and they just wouldn't. They thought that it was for protest, and they wouldn't allow them in. So that's your problem. Like, I think generally, I can't, again, this is not an overall picture, but my understanding is that a lot of companies here are not equipping their staff well enough, but sometimes it's not by, they don't mean it. It's just that some of the gear is hard hard to stalk at this point.
Chris, I know you wanted to say something.
JA has provided helmets and masks for journalists free of charge. But of course, if they want to make a small donations, fine. Briefly on our contacts with the police, after June 9th, when we had cases of reporters being blocked in their work and also attacked late in the evening outside Electrical, we set up a meeting. We had a meeting with the police at PPRB before June the 12th because we know something is going to happen then. So we raised all these issues about, say, obstructions and attacks, etc., etc. There were lots of promises, but of course, what happened on June 12th, we all know we received close to 30 cases of reporters being attacked. So I think you guys saw pictures of, say, photographers, reporters. No protesters were around, but where the tear gases canisters felt. Since then, that's the early June. We made repeated requests. We wrote to the commissioner. We wrote to the chief executive. No, nothing happened. We staged a march late June at government headquarters and police headquarters. After that, it seems that some people in the government would like to set up something between us and the police and maybe some other for officials. That was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We are always open to talk and for us to know each other. The problem, exactly what happened, why we were targeted, but that had never been, say, answer so far, as I said earlier. So that's the kind of situation now. And I'd just like to add a little point. Remember, two days ago, we heard the police saying sorry, apology to the reporter, Tai Kung Pao reporter, and the other student for the tear gas and also for the arrests. That's the first time that they make an apology. I read what the Commissioner Low said after June 12th at the press conference when reporters wore helmets and vases as a symbol of protest against police brutality. What Commissioner Low said, I checked again last night, was that I would say sorry if reporters feel they were impolitely treated. If to me, that's not a clear-cut apology. They did make a clear-cut apology 2 days ago. I could only say this because that guy works for Tai Kung Pao. I think it's ridiculous to me. So far, the police had never, in fact, say sorry to the journalists for some of these cases. So to us, clear, say, attack targeting a journalist, at least an explanation.
I'd like to try to get in a few more quick questions. Anybody? Yeah, over here. Someone will bring you the microphone. Please identify yourself.
Yes, I'm a member of FCC, Houghton Lee. Just a quick question. When I observed, the video about the battlefields, I found a lot of press. I mean, the people with the press vest and the press helmet. But I believe, as a lot of people say, there are a lot of freelance, but not as professionally trained as Eric, okay? But they are not really professional journalists, but they just wear a press helmet, go in and take photos, okay? And I even seen a video, I didn't fact check it, there's a group of real journalists surrounding one of those, sometimes they call it fake journalists. I don't know what they talk about, maybe, something like that. So in general, what do you think of these, there are a large number of them running around. Do you think they are helping your job or they are a hindrance or undermining what the real journalists, the professional journalists are doing?
Have you seen this? Eric, you want to take that since you got named?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's always a good idea to have more, journalists, real journalists per se, like on the ground recording the events. I know that some local media have taken the approach of doing a lot of live stream so that we can show more facts about what's going on the ground to our audience. But I am personally I'm also very concerned about people pretending to be a member of the press but not doing what journalists are supposed to do, because that puts all of us at risk. And so I think I don't have a clear answer to that. I think we just have to be vigilant on the ground. If we do see people, pretending to be a member of the press, but they are, they're not really doing what the press, is doing, then we need to, point that out. We need to, make sure that, we confront them. And I think, that's, something that we just have to do on the ground. I'm personally concerned about people faking to be a journalist on the ground in this movement.
Yeah, Damon, you wanted to answer that, and then I think we'll close after that.
Yeah, I kind of have like 3 answers to that. Like, number one, the police sometimes even see real journalists as fake ones. They would, I don't know if you've seen the footage of Oriental Daily journalists who got shoved and then the police shouted at her, "Oh, you're a fake journalist," or something like that. Like, and I think there are occasions where protesters identified, or the press identified somebody who is trying to shoot pictures of the face of protesters, and apparently the person pretended to be from a Japanese agency, but when the real press confronted him, he turned to talk in Mandarin. So I don't know what happened there, but people have spotted that kind of stuff. But I think from our perspective, I was going to say, like, protesters themselves, some of them online have been saying, "Oh, let's try to become a fake journalist and protect ourselves." And there are other online users telling them off, because even the protesters, some of them do see that if you do that, you're harming those who are actually recording the facts. So I think I'll put it at that.
Great. Anthony, you wanted to make a quick comment?
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of people going out, taking photos, grabbing a camera. I think that's a natural response to what's going on around you. And there are a lot of young, budding journalists who are out there. And I think it's partly, I can't speak for everyone else, but I think I'm comfortable with people like that around me, and you kind of try to carry them through that experience of reporting, and just hope that they can get through it in a safe manner. And that's how you start up. So I think a lot of young photographers are building up great portfolios just through being in the protests. But as for the fake journalists, I was in Yuen Long the other week, and I think everyone was just starting to go home, and there was this guy who came up to me, and he said that he had been following us around. He was a protester acting as a journalist, but he said he just can't afford the full body armor that all the protesters are using. So he said, "Oh, thanks for letting me stand with you guys." I was like, okay, whatever. So each their own, I think.
Well, please join me in giving a big round of applause to our panelists. And I'm sure they'll be around afterwards if you want to speak to them. And to Emily's point before, if you have ideas for future panels or future workshops, there are several board members here, including myself. Let us know. Thank you.
Good job, guys.
Well, thank you. Well, thanks.
Should we, just like last time, they can come up and Yeah, I fear there was footage.